Hi everyone, I'm Alex.
And I'm Sue.
Hi, welcome to our second podcast. So the next step in our adventure. The last time we connected and we met with everybody, we talked about the science and the practical application of hope. And today we're going to talk about a concept called agency. So over to you, Sue. If you were forced to translate that language and describe agency without using the word agency, why, well, how would you do that?
Well, it's interesting because I remember when I first heard the term agency, I'm like, it sounds like a really posh word. Same as pedagogy. When I first heard the term, I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
So for me, agency is really about choice and action. So the two go together as in it's the ability to decide, and I love the word decide because it means to cut off from.
Yeah.
And but it's also about doing. So agency is about having the choice, the option, and doing something with it, like responsible action, maybe is what I'd think of it as,
Right.
taking behavioral action.
Awesome. So could you give us a practical example of what that would look like in somebody's day-to-day life?
Yeah, look, I think, and again, we know from sort of various bits of science and research around autonomy, we can have too much or too little, for instance. So for me, if I think about agency in the day to day, it's having the ability to choose what I eat for breakfast, what time I get up in the morning. It's might be, and again, I might need to get up because I've got to go to work, but I still have a certain amount of agency, of choice, of options within that realm. It can be agency as far as my choice of how I manage my time in my workplace, which again, you can equate that to autonomy. Do I have too much? Do I have too little? So for me, it's about those day-to-day choices that we have. And sometimes we don't think we have. So
Right.
in my mind, sometimes we make a rationale that, oh, well, I have no choice about something. I have to do this, etc. Whereas maybe sometimes, and again, it comes down for me to the small bits. We ha often have more choice than we think. I don't know what
Right.
your thoughts are, but
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I think that for me, when I think about the whole concept of agency, I start to think about, well, what does it actually feel like if you feel like you lack agency?
Mm.
And in our last podcast, I mentioned somebody I worked with who described herself as stuck,
Yeah.
and that's the word I'm looking for often when I'm looking for people who say that they don't necessarily use the word agency, but that feeling exists for them, and often describe it through the word stuck. They don't know what to do.
Yeah, and to your point, it could be that somebody's in a role or a part of their life. I don't know whether they're running their own business or whether they're working as an employee or whether they're in a relationship where they feel they have no sense of agency. They feel that they're stuck. And I wonder if, again, if we break it down to the small things, there might be bigger constraints on you due to family, due to financial whatever that you might not just be able to throw it up all in the air and leap out into
Yeah.
freedom. But there might be small things you can do. And I think, again, that's the bit that we sometimes miss is the little things we can do.
Absolutely. So talk to me about the science. What does the science tell us? Why does it matter?
Well, it definitely matters, although sometimes we know from the research we can have too much. So if you look at too much, if we have too much, we might find that we don't do anything.
Right.
We might find we sort of get lost. I remember one lady who said to me, "Oh, I want to start my own business. I've been wanting to start my own business for years." I said, "Oh, how long?" She said, "Oh, 4 years, and I'm just not getting anywhere. I haven't started anything yet, and I feel like I'm useless." And I'm oh, and I said, "Oh, cool. What type of business do you want to start?" And she said, "Oh, anything."
Yeah.
That's an example of too much, as in when we have too much, we don't get started. Sometimes we might need to narrow our parameters so that we are making choices within a boundary, if you like. It might be a
Mm.
boundary we put on ourselves, but equally we can have too little. And when we feel completely trapped by anything and we feel like we can't make choices. One of the things that the science tells us, though, is actually we think we want more but
Mm.
having more is often not as good for us as we think it is.
Wow, that's fascinating, isn't it? That's amazing.
Well, one of the things that I love, there's a wonderful gentleman called Barry Schwartz, and he talks about this is we want lots of choice around things. And he says if you go down the high street and you're wanting to buy a shirt, and there's two stores, and one store says no refunds, no returns, and the other one says full refund within 3 months, return and your money back. Most people would go in the second. He said you should ideally go in the first. Because when you're stuck with the shirt you buy, you like it more.
Brilliant. That's awesome. So this does this link to a concept I've read before, which is that if you go to a supermarket and there's a whole range of tins of beans,
Yeah.
you're less likely to choose one than if there's only two or three options.
Absolutely. Because again, too much choice, it's overwhelming for us. And they've actually found that even in developing countries, people want more choice, they want more autonomy, they want more options.
Mm.
But actually, people in developed countries, when they go to a supermarket and they have the 50 choices of
Yeah,
beans, they're less happy than with their choice.
yeah,
So I think there's something around this sense of agency, autonomy, choice that we need to consider that we have sometimes more choice than we need.
yeah.
And it might stop us from actually taking that responsible action that I think goes with agency. Agency is not just the choice, it's then the taking action.
Right. So when you talk about taking responsible action, could you define that for me?
Yeah, taking responsible action, I think, is something that's sort of come out of a variety of things. Paul Wong talks about this, or used to talk about this. He unfortunately passed away. This actual ability to, yes, we talked about before, our hope for the future, etc. But we have to take action. We have to do something, and sometimes even through the difficulties, the trauma, etc. It's taking on board. Well, what can I do, rather than waiting for somebody else to fix it, to solve it, etc. I remember my husband saying, he said it many times since I first started my business, wouldn't it be nice if Richard Branson just gave you $1 million for a contract?
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, dear, that would be nice. But if I want to grow my business, I have to take responsible action. As in, even if I don't want to, I've got to go to a networking event or I need to go and try and promote our services or do something on social media. Sometimes responsible action isn't always nice. It might not make you happy in the moment, but sometimes that action is critical to gain that sense of agency, that choice, that option.
So I don't know if you can answer this, Sue, and it's kind of going to be one of them broad ones that could be almost anything. But I'm sitting there and I'm about to kind of take some responsible action. How do I know which action to take?
You don't.
Right, right.
And this is the thing. Sometimes what we do is we agonize over what I should do and we end up not making a decision.
Yeah,
And one of the things I have to bring in the neuroscience here because I love the brain and how it works.
yeah,
We know from a neuroscience perspective, the easiest decision for a human brain is no decision, as
right.
in leave it as it is. It is much harder to make a decision to change something sometimes than it is to not make a decision, as in stick with what you've always done. And this is why I love the word decide, because decide means to cut off from. So, to your point about responsible action, sometimes in your head, you know what the decision needs to be, but we
Yeah,
don't want to take the action because it would be final, if you like. And we worry about what could
mm,
happen with the unknown. But sometimes the only thing we can do is take responsible action because it will take us on a journey.
yeah,
And the first step might not be, it's a bit like we spoke about when we spoke last week about hope, is it's the little things. And sometimes you take a little thing and you're like, oh, I'm not sure that's going where I want to go. And you might then make a different decision. But
right.
no decision is not helpful.
Right. So therefore, again, you've beautifully described how the brain kind of protects us, if you like.
Yeah.
Um, how do we overcome that barrier? How do we overcome the barrier inside our brain that's preventing us from taking action?
Yeah, and I think for me, this is where responsible action again goes to the small things. So I had this conversation with somebody recently who was thinking about what they do in their future, and they were uncertain of where do they go. Now, I got a sense that he'd already made up his mind, but it was the actually having to say it and decide and cut off from, etc. So I said, well, how about your next responsible action is getting more information?
Yeah.
Let's get more information about what this thing that you think you might do in 3 years' time might look like. Let's see if we can find out more. Let's find out more from people who've already done it. So again, it's those sometimes responsible action is gathering information. until you're ready to go, yeah, no, I'm comfortable now that I'm making that choice. Otherwise, if you're feeling a bit braver and adventurous, just give it a go and see what happens.
I have to share with you a moment from my own life where I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. I was in a job that I didn't like at all, and I couldn't see a pathway out of it. And I was blessed to be having dinner with somebody I'm not going to name because they haven't given me permission, but is actually a well-known person in the positive psychology field. And he was using these processes without me being aware of it, and we were just having dinner together. And he said that you need to do this particular degree course. And I thought I'm not in the slightest bit interested. And he explained to me how it would open up my thinking and expose me to different people. And he could see the resistance. So he turned to my wife and he said, "You need to make him do it." And she did. And it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. But sometimes again, it's really helpful if we have somebody else looking from the outside saying, "Do something."
But again, this comes down to, again, too much agency sometimes is, and you can do
Right.
whatever you like,
Yes.
you don't do it. But when
Yeah.
someone forces you or narrows the window of opportunity,
Yeah.
and sometimes we think we don't want that, but actually it can be so much more beneficial for us when that reduced number of choices, exactly as
Yeah.
you said about the tin of beans. Give me a choice of two and I'll be
Yeah.
happy with my choice. Give me a
Yes.
choice of 100 and I'll probably never be happy with my choice.
Yes. So one of the things that I really admire about you is you don't just bring the science. You really understand the science in absolute depth, and you've studied it, but you've lived all of this stuff. So could you share a story from your own life where agency became pivotal in the next steps forward?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few things. So I've been lucky enough to be in this space for a while and having to make choices around certain things. And sometimes one of the things we actually know for entrepreneurs, they often have more autonomy and sometimes are less happy. So
Yeah.
more psychological well-being because they have more autonomy, but actually less happy because there's a lot of pressure around those sorts of things and everything
Mm.
falls to them. And if I think about autonomy, one of the times that I found really, really difficult was when COVID hit in our business. So I had quite a few people that worked with me. So I felt extremely responsible for their lives, their livelihoods. All of our work was pretty much face to face, apart from literally one client. And to your point, autonomy had been taken away because we could no longer do whatever we wanted to do
Yeah.
previously. We couldn't go out and do face to face. So the autonomy was like really reduced. But my sense of agency was use what I know.
Mm.
So I, after recovering from, the stress and the shock and things like that, it was literally, okay, what do I know that we as a team are really good at? What have we done really well? And how do I refocus attention on that? And how do I make choices within this small window to do more of those sorts of things? And that included a range of things. So for me, it included moving location, so traveling 8 hours outside of Sydney and moving up to Byron Bay. It included closing down an office. It included all sorts of decisions and choices in line with hopefully positive HR processes around keeping people on through the job keeper, or inviting people if they wanted to leave in a very comfortable way as I could. But my choices, I was taking responsible action because I was the owner, if you like, and I needed to. And I was trying to minimize risk. But at the same time, my agency or my window had narrowed.
Mhm.
And for me, it was actually the process of taking some sometimes really uncomfortable steps, really not enjoyable things at all, but actually making the steps that was important. Did I make all the right steps 100%? No, possibly not.
Mhm.
Did I do the best I could? Yes. But what I think was important to me was actually taking the steps.
Yeah. Yes. I love that, Sue, and I think, again, something that you've said there that's really critical is that it's not about perfection. Perfection is really a way of holding yourself back. It really becomes paralysis, and taking some steps and working out where you are is the crucial part of any process of moving forward.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I think also, Alex, just on that, the responsible action is sometimes it is what you know is the right thing to do, or you believe is the right thing to do in that moment, and actually taking steps. And are you prepared to take it?
yeah,
That's the
yes,
important one.
yeah. So imagining somebody listened to our previous podcast. And they say, yeah, I want to kind of build on this whole concept of being a hopeful human being, and I've developed a bit of a vision of where I would like to be into the future, and it's not too unrealistic. It's reasonably concrete. I can see a pathway there, and now I want to take some action towards that. Some responsible action, to use your words. Well, what would your recommendations be in terms of the next steps?
I think some next steps is working out the small things. So we keep coming back to the small things. It's not the big things, the
Yeah.
small things. It's looking at what your scope is and, if possible, narrowing it before you make those steps. Doesn't mean to
Right.
say it can't change, but actually narrowing where your space is, if you like, so that you're not feeling so overwhelmed by what's possible. And it might be then small things, things that you do every day. I'll give you an example, and I often do this with my groups. I give them 2 minutes. I literally set my alarm for 2 minutes and said, okay, in the next 2 minutes, your job is to do as much as you can towards what it is you're trying to
Yeah.
achieve. Now, that could be Googling something or looking things up or putting something in your calendar, etc. But one small step. And we know this thing about responsible action is when you take one and you again decide, you cut off from, it helps you move forward with the others. So it's all about those sort of small things. Again, mapping it out if it helps you. You only have to map out 2 or 3 steps and then you'll see. And I read this actually this morning. If you drive a car, we used the analogy before of driving a car. So
Yeah.
let's imagine I'm driving from mine to yours in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I've got my headlights on, it's pitch black outside. I can only see about 50 meters in front of me, maybe 100 meters if I've got them on full beam.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can't tell where I'm going,
Yeah.
but I can get all the way to yours from mine with my
Yeah.
headlights on. And that for me is that small, responsible action. And it's okay that you can't see the whole journey.
I think that's absolutely gorgeous, Sue, and I think it really, to be honest, sums up the journey of life. It's
It
fantastic.
does.
Yes. Um, and I love this idea of small actions. I mean, we've both talked about it a lot. And I would add that whenever somebody's thinking about taking some action, they're thinking about committing to moving forward, it's useful to pause and ask yourself, is this small enough?
Mm.
Because even sometimes in small, the action is too big. And if it can be chunked down even further, then that's a great way to go. So, you're again using your example of giving people 2 minutes. I worked with somebody who her mind was just racing constantly. She was a very senior executive in an organization, and she needed those mindfulness practices to be embedded, but had tried to meditate, and had really committed to she was going to do it bigger than everybody else, grander than everybody else. And I challenged her to just be mindful for 30 seconds a day. And knowing that she would always exceed the 30 seconds, uh, but keeping it that small made it more likely that she was going to commit to it.
I love it. It's a great example. And again, to your point, I think we often think we have to do this big decision and this big thing. And again, years ago, I remember somebody saying to me, if you think you want to go and be a dairy farmer, don't just go and buy a farm and a bunch of cows. Go and live on one for a couple of weeks and see if you like getting up at 4:30 in the morning to milk the cows.
Absolutely.
If you want to do
Yes.
cooking school in Bali, don't go and set up your whole business. Just see if you've got a few friends who want to come and cook with you.
A- Absolutely. Yeah. So, what one final comment you would like to make to the listener, the viewer, what would it be?
I think be brave enough to take those small actions. Not the big ones. The big ones might seem too scary, but be brave enough to take them, to recognize you have a choice. Even if you feel stuck, there are always choices that you can make. So be brave enough to try one step, one 100-meter dash in the dark with your lights on.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sue. And, just to reinforce that for everybody, but in terms of being brave, it's not about moving again outside of your comfort zone. It's moving to a new familiarity. The more you do it, the more it becomes familiar, and the more it becomes a habit, and it'll become easier and easier as time moves on. So sensational stuff. Thank you, Sue. And as
Yeah.
we move to the next one, we're going to link all of this to meaning and purpose as we connect again. So hopefully see yourself and everybody else in that session. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.